Hey guys, how's it going? Dudey here. I am back with another video. Guys, today we're going back into the realm of human experimentation. We've looked at the Nazis, we've looked at the Japanese, we've looked at the Stanford prison experiment, but today we're going to delve into the history of American human experimentation. Now, I do just want to pre-warn you guys, these experiments are incredibly harrowing. They are, quite frankly, evil, and some of you may find what you're about to hear very upsetting. These are going to be in no particular order, guys. There's no order of gratuity or anything like that. I'm just simply going to tell you some of the worst atrocities Americans have done in the name of science. Starting off with the digestive tract experiment. In 1822, a fur trader on Mackinac Island, Michigan, was accidentally shot in the stomach. He was treated by Dr. William Beaumont. Despite the most dire of predictions, the fur trader actually survived. However, he did have a massive hole in his stomach. This is known as a fistula. This never healed. Dr. Beaumont recognized a unique opportunity to observe the digestive process. Beaumont immediately began conducting experiments on the fur trader. Beaumont would tie food to a piece of string, then insert it through the hole into the stomach, leave it there, pull it out a few hours later, and observe what digestion had done to the food. Now, I would argue that this is rather inhumane. However, this did lead to Beaumont's discovery that, contrary to popular belief, digestion was in fact a chemical process. The testicle transplant experiments of 1920. Dr. Leo L. Stanley, resident physician at St. Quentin's prison, performed experiments on over 10,000 inmates over the course of decades. However, two of the most atrocious included that of transplanting testicles. The first was of animal testicles transplanted onto living prison inmates to see if it could be done and to test virality. The other, human-to-human testicle transplantation. However, the testicles being transplanted were that of executed inmates. He was a big believer in eugenics and a massive racist, much like Josef Mengele, the Nazi angel of death, of which I've done an entire video on him. Go and check that out after this video. Much like Mengele, Stanley also believed in forced sterilization of those he deemed not worthy of procreation. Interestingly, the American eugenics movement carried on long past when the Nazi experiments were revealed and heavily deplored within the same area. The fatal stomach bug experiments. There was a fatal stomach bug going around that they wanted to find a cure for, but they also wanted to find how it was most easily transmitted. Was it through the air or was it through contaminated food and substances? So what they did was they got a load of prisoners, they sat them down and they forced them to eat infected shit. They literally sat prisoners down and force-fed them human feces. It's not known if the prisoners were rewarded at all for participating in this experiment. The Guatemala syphilis experiment. In 2010, a declassified document shocked America and the world. It in fact led to Barack Obama having to make a public apology to Guatemala. The worst thing about this is that these experiments rendered zero results, so it was quite literally pointless. In the 1940s, syphilis and gonorrhea was rife within the American army. The American government were paying $34 million a year on treatments that seemingly weren't even working. So Dr. John Charles Cutler began to study it on behalf of the American government. He went to Guatemala and when he was there infected 1,300 people, including sex workers, prisoners, soldiers and mentally ill people with both gonorrhea and syphilis. The ages were between 10 all the way up to 72. Many of the younger subjects and mentally ill subjects didn't really know what they were signing up for, so therefore technically didn't give consent. The sex workers were infected by being injected into their cervix. The prisoners were infected either by being injected themselves or being forced to have sex with those sex workers. The mentally ill people had forced abrasions to their penises, which was infected with syphilis and gonorrhea, or it was ingested, or they received a cisternal puncture, which is literally a giant needle in the back of your skull straight into the cerebral fluid. This went on for 5 years, and then a further 5 years was taken to observe the results. And the thing was, as I said, there were no results. All these people suffered for no reason. The acres of skin experiments. In 1951, Dr. Albert M. Kligman was a dermatologist at the University of Pennsylvania and the future inventor of Retin A. He began experimenting on prisoners in Philadelphia's Holmesburg prison. Chillingly, Kligman told a newspaper reporter, "All I saw before me were acres of skin. It was like a farmer seeing a field for the first time." Over the next 20 years, inmates would allegedly willingly allow Kligman to use their bodies to test their skin on all sorts of things, including toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo, skin creams, detergents, liquid diets, eye drops, foot powders, and hair dyes. These experiments required very painful skin biopsies and painful procedures to test the effects. None of the inmates experienced long-term harm. Radiation on testicles. Between 1963 and 1973, dozens of Washington and Oregon prison inmates were used in experiments designed to test the effects of radiation upon the testicles. Bribed with money and the suggestion of potential parole, 130 inmates enrolled into this experiment. This was conducted at the University of Washington on behalf of the US government. A lot of the time, subjects were strapped to a chair and exposed to radiation on their testicles, that of receiving an X-ray 2,400 times for periods of 10 minutes. However, it was later learned that these experiments were far more dangerous than what they had been led to believe. In 2000, former participants of this experiment received $2.4 million in a class action settlement from the university. Child shock therapy. In the 1960s, Dr. Loretta Bender of New York's Creedmoor Hospital began her child shock therapy experiments. She believed this was a revolutionary treatment for children with social issues. Her methods also included interviewing and analysing a sensitive child in front of massive groups of people, then applying gentle pressure to the child's head. Supposedly, any child that moved when this mild pressure was applied had early signs of schizophrenia. Dr. Loretta Bender herself was the victim of a misunderstood childhood, but this made her unsympathetic to all the children in her care. By the time this woman was shut down, she'd performed electroshock therapy on over 100 children, the youngest of which was just 3 years old. The newborn baby experiments. In the 1960s, researchers at the University of California began to do tests and experiments to study changes in blood pressure and blood flow. The researchers used 113 newborn babies ranging from just 1 hour old to 3 days. In one experiment, a catheter was inserted through the umbilical arteries into the aorta. The newborn's feet were immersed into ice water for the purposes of testing aortic pressure. In another experiment, over 50 newborn babies were strapped to a circumcision board and tilted upside down so the blood rushed to their head so that they could monitor the blood pressure. The 1972 Tuskegee syphilis experiments. This was once again Dr. John Charles Cutler of the Guatemala experiments. This time, this experiment was specifically aimed at African American men that had syphilis. These men purposely received no medical treatment whatsoever, and this was all just so that they could track the progress and study the progression of syphilis. This meant no effective care, as the men died, went blind, went insane because of their untreated syphilis. This one is incredibly sad. This is the 1940s polio vaccine experiment. Dr. Jones Salk conducted experiments on incredibly mentally ill patients at what was then called an insane asylum. The test subjects were never fully aware of what they were getting themselves into because they were not of sound mind to consent. They tested influenza and the flu on these poor people, but it was eventually abandoned because what they found was these people were not capable of articulating what they were feeling their symptoms were. So therefore it all came to nothing, and these people were infected with influenza and the flu for no reason in the end. In the 1950s, 23 inmates of a prison were infected with Asian flu. That's despicable in itself. what makes this worse is they were infected by injecting it down the urinary tract of their penis. In the 1970s, one prisoner was subject to one of the most awful experiments where the skin on his back was peeled off and then an abrasive, corrosive chemical applied to the wound to test a drug of its healing capabilities. Two left. In the 1960s, half of the states in America made it legal for prisoners to be tested on for experimentation. This meant the pharmaceutical companies had an opportunity to test their products. One of the most heinous of all was in 1963 when a pharmaceutical company was injecting cancer into debilitated 19-year-old patients. And finally, in 1963, 66 mentally disabled children at a public school on Staten Island were infected orally with hepatitis, purely just to be given another pill to test if it would cure it or not. So guys, what do you think? What do you think of these horrible, evil American experiments? Human experimentation in the name of finding cures for diseases. Where do you stand on it all? What do you think was the worst one? Do you know any that I've missed? Please do let me know down below. If you enjoy this type of content, let me know as well by hitting that like button, leaving me a comment. I read all of them. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. If you want to support me as a creator, Patreon is an amazing way to do that. The link for that is down below. I stream all the time on twitch.tv/DudeyRhino. Go over there, check that out as well. I upload 3 to 4 times a week on this channel. I'm absolutely loving it, loving the growth, and I know you guys loving the content as well, which means the world to me. So thank you so much, guys. I will see you very soon in the next one. Sweet one, geese.